So we've been continuing to talk about the colonization of the New World. And when we say the New World, we mean North America and South America. It's not actually new, it's just new to the Europeans. And the particular Spanish settlements that we're going to look at and talk about today are the missions. And so as we think about the missions, I want to kind of put a little bit of context here. So stick with me for a second while I explain the context. We're still trying to Spain and other European nations are still in the process of trying to basically lay claim to as much of the territory in North and South America as possible. And this has been done throughout for the last several hundred years during before the missions and presidios that come to Texas. It was done fairly successfully in Mexico from the Spanish perspective. It was successful. But we've also got to recognize that a lot of colonization was quite brutal and quite very heavy-handed and very much very much ignored the needs of the indigenous peoples. The missions took a little bit of a different tack. They didn't try. Their purpose in general was not to set out to be brutal. They still had the same purpose. They were still trying to gain the territory and gain control of that territory, but they were trying to maybe have a little bit of a lighter hand. Now, not in every case. We'll see that some particular areas and missions were depending upon who is running them, could be still very strict and brutal. But the purpose of these missions is to convert the natives to the Catholic faith and therefore also and make them loyal citizens to the Spanish crown. So they recognized and they believe that the faith of the people, if they could convert them to Catholic faith, that would have a unifying measure. They also sincerely believed that it would be for the good of the Native Americans to be converted to the Catholic faith. They believed that salvation and an eternity with God was to their benefit, to the Native Americans' benefit, and so that's their purpose there. So there is a sense of trying to do something good for the Native Americans. Of course, at the same time, it's not necessarily what it's today by today's standards. It's very much Eurocentric and focused on what is good for Europe. But there is a sense in this case that the missions are less harmful, perhaps, or at least trying to be less harmful than other ways of colonizing and setting up and gathering land. And one of the final thing here on this, the big idea with a mission and colony is that, well, if you're going to control a piece of land, you can lay claim to it. You can say you can claim the land, but if you don't have anybody living there, you haven't really claimed it in any way that's meaningful. Until you have people living on the land, you can say you claim it, but it's meaningless until you can actually control it, until you can actually have people there that are willing to fight to keep it. Well, instead of sending enough colonists there, this goal here is there's already people living here. Let's show them our way of life and convince them that this is a better way than their way. And therefore, then they will become loyal citizens and they will, along with those that move here, be able to keep and have this territory. So that's the purpose. The purpose is to gain a stronghold in this territory, particularly the Southwest United States. And we're, of course, focusing on the area of Texas because we know there has been a French threat with La Salle and the people, the French that have been exploring in the Mississippi River Valley. So the problems that the missions faced is that natives ran away. They may come there for a period of time. If there is trouble, if there's not enough food, or if an enemy is nearby, natives may come to the mission for a period of time as a place of of safety or a place where there might be food. But then once those issues or problems are resolved, they run away. Um, Also, they may, after spending some time there, decide this is not the life for me. Many of the natives that would come there, they may listen and participate in some of the proceedings of the Catholic faith, but mostly did not actually convert and change their religion. They generally kept their Native American religions, various depending upon the various groups and what their religion was. Now, that doesn't mean there were no converts. There were some. And then finally, and certainly the most negative impact here is that that Native Americans are exposed to diseases at these missions because they're coming into close contact with Europeans. And so the Columbian Exchange we think of as starting with Columbus, which it did, but it continues on as contact is made, and especially closer contact with new people groups. Those people groups get exposed to disease in a way that causes them. So just here's a quick look at a map. We see that there's the Spanish missions in Texas, and you can see it says missions and presidios. That you can see lots of missions all along East Texas and even into Louisiana. This is to guard specifically to guard against the French threat of taking this territory. We see lots of missions here around what is currently current San Antonio and around there. And you'll also notice that these missions are always located near a river because water is essential for survival. And so that's, obviously if you're going to set up a mission somewhere, you set up a mission where you've got fresh water. So the daily life, what was life like there? Well, the mission was a life of prayer. But it was not only prayer. There was, if you're going to have food, you're going to have work the fields. You're going to have to grow the food that you need and do those things. There's also workshops depending upon the region. There may be a blacksmith shop. There may be basket weaving. There may be a grist mill. There's various different types of activities and work that would be done at the missions, and depending upon the location of the mission and the resources located near that mission would impact the types of jobs that were done. Children would attend schools at the missions, and then there would be certainly religious instruction. Finally, who lived there? Well, it was priests and friars, Franciscan priests primarily, that were setting up these missions throughout Texas. And then they were hoping that Native Americans would move there, and that did happen to some extent. Some missions were more successful at that than others. You can see inside this mission, what's the overall cultural impact of the missions? Well, the Catholic religion is still in Texas. Somewhere between probably 15 and 20% of our modern population is Catholic still today, and it is and just even the architecture of the Southwest and certainly of Texas, we see Spanish influence throughout much of the architecture in the state. And so there are many other cultural impacts that we'll look at another lesson, but with the missions, we're going to focus on the fact that it is because the missions were about religion, and so their big cultural impact is that faith still exists here in the state today.